Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have back on the Goldstein on Gelt show best-selling author Michael E. Gerber, and in fact, one of my heroes. He wrote The E-Myth, and Michael, I understand you're working on a new book called The Epic Entrepreneur. Tell us about that.
Well, it's epic. It's bigger than big. It's greater than great. It's a transformation of the way people have come to think of entrepreneurship. It's really you might say, at the apex of entrepreneurship. It's what Steve Jobs did at Apple. It's what truly original thinkers do when they begin to think about an enterprise and begin to think about what the outcome of that enterprise is to be, not just commercial, but social, not just social, but transformational. And it sounds like what kids would think about if kids were really fascinated with entrepreneurship. But that's where I am, and we're very, very excited about it.
So it almost sounds like you're talking about what people need to think about the very beginning of their entrepreneurial trek. It's kind of when they're dreaming about what they want to be or do.
Well, yeah, I guess that's it. I think probably I mentioned Jobs. I call it the Jobs effect. Jobs was the least likely guy to do what he actually did and then accomplished what he actually accomplished. He started out as an outsider. I mean, essentially, he was on a spiritual trek. At that time, of course, as he was doing that, that wasn't an original thing to do, but he was a dropout from school. He didn't care about school. He didn't care about rules. He didn't care about all of the things that everybody else cared about. He walked around barefooted. He was a hippie. He was truly, truly, truly that. He wasn't a technology guy. He wasn't a computer scientist. He wasn't anything that one would expect he would have been in order to invent what he invented. And that is really what resides at the heart of the epic entrepreneur as we think about it.
So what did differentiate him? Yeah.
I'm sorry?
So what did, in fact, differentiate him to make him who he was?
His passion. His passion and his obstinacy and his unwillingness to be a part of the status quo, and his desire to create. It was really that. It wasn't his desire to create a company. It was his desire to create. It's what I like to call, in the dreaming room, awakening the entrepreneur within. I'm essentially saying that if we're born in the image of God, and I believe we are, we're born to create. And unfortunately, for most of us, we absolutely lose that part of ourselves in the process of, unfortunately, growing up. So I'd say Steve Jobs never grew up. And truly originators, as I think of them, like Steve Jobs, don't really grow up. They don't become your dad. They don't become the grown-up next door. They're truly on a path to creating something that is called from within, that stimulates and inspires them and obsesses them to the point where they begin to discover stuff that the rest of us don't.
Wow, it's that kind of passion, which is quite impressive, and in fact, which is something you have taught people over decades. We're talking with Michael E. Gerber, who is a repeat customer on the Goldstein on Gelt show. If you missed the first interview he had when he was here, you can check it out. Just either go to goldsteinongelt.com or else go to YouTube and look up Goldstein on Gelt and Michael E. Gerber. In that interview, we spoke a lot about his first book, The E-Myth. And in fact, Michael, I want to mention something or ask you a question based on what you're saying now, because I am a fan of The E-Myth. I read it many times. I've run many successful businesses based on what you taught. So I guess once again, I will thank you publicly for doing that for us. But one of the things in the book that you really bring home is that businesses are about processes and trying to make a system for everything that you do, which to me seems like a very down-to-earth approach, and it works. At least I feel I'm a good example of that. On the other hand, now you seem to be changing the tune a little bit and talk more about dreaming. And on your website, you talk about the dreaming room. How do these two fit together?
Well, it is an absolutely brilliant question. They never were apart. When you go back to the E-Myth that you've read, if you recall, we began not with the business. We didn't begin with the system. We didn't begin with the processes. We began with your primary aim. We began with the question of who am I and why am I here? Well, the dreaming room is simply an extension of that. It's intended to bring us closer to the heart of what true entrepreneurship is and how an entrepreneur, a personality we call an entrepreneur, is constituted. And in the dreaming room, I talk about the four constituent characteristics or roles of an entrepreneur called the dreamer, the thinker, the storyteller, and the leader. Well, without a dream, without a great result we're here to create, it's simply a commercial enterprise. And I'm suggesting in my new work on the epic entrepreneur that the epic entrepreneur is beyond just a commercial enterprise. He or she is there to create something stunningly original, something that can have a profound impact on the world. And so we're moved by meaning, not just money. We're moved by meaning, not just the way to make it. We're moved by meaning, the underlying premise or ethos underlying any great creation. And I'm simply suggesting now that it's time for us to get back to that elemental thing, the dreamer, the thinker, the storyteller, and the leader, and to truly put them together in a way that any individual who is stuck wherever she or he is stuck can begin to understand that that stuckness is a product of their lack of imagination. Not a product of the economy, not a product of what's going on in the world around us, but a product of our lack or under-inspired imagination. And so at the heart of the E-Myth is, in fact, awakening the entrepreneur within. That's the E-Myth. It's the lack of entrepreneurship in 99% of all companies. And it's not just about the system. The system, you might say, is the method through which the dream, the vision, and the purpose are translated into action.
All right, so let's bring that down to something that maybe our listeners here on the Goldstein on Gelt show can apply. One of the things we talk about in terms of personal finance, and it sounds very parallel to what you're talking about, is that before you start choosing your stocks and bonds, and before you even develop a financial plan or an investment strategy, you have to figure out what your goals are, whether you're trying to retire or help your kids or take a vacation or change your lifestyle. And a lot of times people tell me, they say, Doug, you talk about setting goals, but, I either have the money or I don't. And it seems to me as though that's a similar question people might ask you, no?
Well, they always do. And in fact, one of the most difficult things we've ever had to do as people implement the E-Myth is really to get through that part about who are you and what do you want. But this is more about something significantly greater than goals, Doug. Goals might be called the pragmatic part or underbelly of what I'm really talking about. What I'm really talking about is aim. In other words, why am I here? So, I'm 78. I don't know your age. But as you get to be 78, or even when I was 40, the very, very real question of mortality is constantly rising up. My dad passed when he was 50 years old from high blood pressure. He had a stroke. So mortality came into my life rather early. So I look at all of this in a significantly greater way, you might say, than goals. Goals are what come out of meaning. Meaning doesn't come out of goals. And so if I'm saying meaning, then I ask, so what's the meaning of this? What is the meaning of my life? If in fact I know that I'm going to go, meaning every single one of us do, then what's going to happen between now and then? What am I going to leave behind? What's my legacy about? How would I describe that legacy in language, in pictures? How would I describe that legacy as though, in fact, I actually deserve to have a legacy? Well, that's what the epic entrepreneur is all about. It's the meaning, it's the legacy, but it's not only that, it's about truly doing what Steve Jobs did with the Mac. He essentially said, I'm going to create a bicycle for the mind, for the imagination, a simple tool that can be used by anyone to produce stunning outcomes, a tool for the mind. And so I'm saying that the epic entrepreneur is going to turn business into a tool for the imagination, for the mind, that will take us away from having to learn how to do all this stuff, but to invent a system for doing all this stuff so that we, each and every single one of us, find it significantly easier to go beyond where we are.
Wow, that sounds fabulous. Michael, I have to tell you, I'm very excited. If you need anyone to do an early review of the book, please send me a copy because I think it's something that's so important, what you're saying, for people to do. But unfortunately, we're just about out of time now. Tell me, how can people keep track of what you're doing and follow the Epic Entrepreneur till its publication date?
Well, I'm going to let you know exactly how to follow the Epic Entrepreneur. All you need to do is follow me at michaelegerber.com. michaelegerbercompanies.com. Go to our website, and we're going to have a link there that will enable every single one of your listeners to follow me because I'm blogging every single day about the Epic Entrepreneur. I've already written 11 of those every day until the book is published on June 20th, my 79th birthday in 2015. How's that?
That sounds great. That sounds like it'll be a great birthday party as well. We've been talking with Michael E. Gerber. Michael, we're going to put links to all of that in the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. So if any of our listeners missed it, it'll be easy for them to find you. I'd like to once again thank you very, very much for coming back. And I hope I'll have you back in time to help to launch the book.
My delight, Doug. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with international investment expert Doug Goldstein. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, go to www.goldsteinongelt.com or write to Doug directly at doug@profile-financial.com.